Hello everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio, and I've got some more gel printing for you today. In September, there is an Instagram challenge going on from Birgit Koopson. It's called hashtag Birgit Koopson's Gel Printing Challenge. I think it's on Instagram, and she has prompts every day. So for this first one, I'm doing prompt 13, which is multimedia. Now, what does that mean? That just means mixing up different types of medium on the plate and then printing with it. So I decided to use some distress oxide inks, some distress oxide sprays, some of these markers, which are artisan markers, and some stamps. And I first thought I might be making maybe some cards for Halloween. Uh, I didn't really like anything that I made though, but it's more about just like maybe drawing on the plate, adding a little bit of texture with some type of stencil or stamp or something. But the idea is just mixing up the media. You can mix anything. You could, put pastels with felt tip markers, with acrylic paint, with pigment ink, with whatever, with alcohol ink. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that you could mix everything up. I wasn't sure that there was a whole lot of demonstrating I could do. I mean, I could sit here all day and, I could spend 5 hours mixing all the media, but am I really teaching anything? I'm just showing you what I did. So that first one, I didn't put any acrylic paint on at all. I had the Distress Oxide, which is a hybrid ink that does have pigment ink in it. So there's a different video from earlier that has pigment ink. I didn't use the Distress ones. I used the regular pigment inks. Distress is a mixture of stuff, and I hadn't tried it yet, so I just decided to use that during this multimedia prompt. So the Distress Oxide left some oxide on the plate. So then when I used a dark acrylic and picked it up, I had those ghosty pumpkins in the background, which looked kind of cool. But I just moved on. More markers on the plate, just making marks, just, lines and dots and whatever. And then I decided to put a little stamping on there. That's a haunted house, but it doesn't really show up in the end, so don't worry about it. I also put some circles with a stamp on there. I sprayed it with a little bit of Distress Oxide, and I realized it was just going to be too busy, too much, too wet, too smeary. I wasn't being patient enough. The Distress Oxide doesn't really dry quickly on the plate. And I'm having the same problem with my other one. I guess I wasn't that careful, or I don't know. I was just, why am I doing this? I guess I wasn't in the mood. So I decided to pick it up with some black cardstock, and that turned out pretty cool. I got that texture on there by using a plastic netting from the back of a bag of lemons, and it's not exactly netting like as in made out of string. It's plastic, cut plastic, but I had cut it off my lemon bag this morning, and I thought it was interesting. So I got a second print off that using some Naples yellow, and they look very different, but they're from the same thing. So then I decided to get out alcohol markers. They also work on the plate as well as alcohol ink works on the plate. There's really not that many things that don't work on a gel plate. They are designed to release, they are designed for printing, and so a lot of different mediums work on there. The only ones that don't are things that naturally resist, like oil pastels. Oil pastels naturally resist, and so if you put them on the plate, they just make a resist and they don't really come off very easily. So that's really the only thing I can think of that you couldn't put on the plate. Of course, there's people who freak out because maybe certain things stain the plate, but I don't worry about that. It's just a tool to me. If it's dirty, I don't really care. So this one, I put some Distress Oxide directly on the plate over my sketchy lines that I had drawn with the alcohol markers. Picked up the first one, I think with unbleached titanium. Maybe I picked that one. No, the first one was Naples yellow, and the second one was unbleached titanium. And I got a second print, which has a different look to it. It's kind of almost like the alcohol markers had bled into the paint, which I'm not sure why that happened. Not even sure I could duplicate it. That's the thing about gel printing. You never get the same thing twice. It's that's why it's called mono printing, because one print comes up the way it is and you just can't ever make it again. So I decided to combine alcohol markers with Posca markers, and then I picked this one up with a metallic paint, silver metallic paint from PBO, onto the black. I thought it turned out pretty cool. And I can get a second one off there. There's still stuff left on there. And I'm just rolling my extra paint onto the 6x6, so without much thought. And then I decide I'll make something out of that by using that same lemon bag plastic to make some texture on it. So there's my second print with the same one. It's a little bit lighter. And then I went for a third with the blue, but it didn't really come out. You can see a little bit of lines, but not much. Doesn't matter. It'll be used as collage anyway. Collage paper anyway, so it'll just be blue. So then I continue working. This is the blue one I'm trying to pull. I continue working on that 6x6. Just I put some more Distress Oxide on there. I put a little bit of acrylic here and there, and then I picked the whole thing up with some white acrylic paint. It turns out to be kind of a neutral looking thing, and there was still some paint on there, so I picked it up with a teal color and then ended up using that for a different thing. So because it was just basically just a turquoise piece of paper. So that's multimedia. You can, take what you want from that. Just messing around. The next day's prompt was texture. And so I got out my Arteza paints. If you're just starting out gel printing and you don't have a lot of stuff, a lot of people will try starting with craft paint, the cheap paint that comes, at Walmart or whatever. That's can be like less than $1 a bottle. I don't have success with that paint. It dries too quickly. It has too much filler in it. It's got plaster of Paris filler in it to make it opaque, and it just doesn't work for me. It dries way too fast. So if you have that same problem and you need a different type of ink, but it's not expensive, I recommend this Arteza paint. This was a container of 24 colors. I've been using them for a while. I'm still trying to use them up. So they're not expensive. I can't tell you right off the top of my head what the price is, but if you just search Arteza or you use my links to Amazon, you'll find it on there. It's not expensive. If you have Amazon Prime, you can get free shipping, of course, because Arteza can sell through Amazon as well as their own site. So I'm just showing you some of my favorite texture tools. Combs are a popular one where you can drag through the paint. I also have some homemade ones made with bottle caps from my water bottles, made with toilet paper tubes, random stuff like I had some styrofoam that has dots on it. I don't know why. It's textured styrofoam. I made that into a tool. Anything around you can find around your house can be a texture tool for a gel plate. You just press it in there and make interesting textures. Placemats and silicone, to pick up a pot. What's that called? Pot holder. I have a little piece of a silicone pot holder that makes interesting texture. This whole texture thing, I mean, just, yeah. This texture over here on the smaller plate was made with textured wallpaper that a friend of mine sent me. Debbie, she sent me some different designs of textured wallpaper. You can get those as, the samples, the sample books from the wallpaper store. you can usually find something like that. And it makes interesting texture on the plate because it's bumpy. I don't know if you guys know what textured wallpaper is, but it's bumpy. It's paintable wallpaper. I remember putting it on my grandmother's house one time. It's you put the wallpaper on, it makes a texture, and then you can paint over it if you want to. So that's the wallpaper texture, the two that I made. Still playing around with more of these little random things that I have. I have several boxes under my desk, and I keep kicking them with my toes, so I need to make it a better way of doing it. But yeah, I made the lines with a ribbon spool. That other one has the texture from an actual takeaway container that's made out of styrofoam. It already had that texture, and then I just added a little bit to it. Anything, just junk, stuff that you would throw away, can have great texture. Just open your eyes, pay attention. Maybe the bottom of your flip flop or your tennis shoe makes interesting texture. There's just tons of ideas, and you just layer it on there and make fun stuff out of it. So, I'm going to show you another thing, and I have another video about this. And in the other video, I used a ball stylus to do this, but I made a few different ones, and I will try to put those in the iCard, the link to that in the iCard if you want to watch it. But what I wanted to show you guys is you can make texture plates yourself with styrofoam. And this is from that same takeout container that had the swirly stuff on the top. This is the bottom. So I'm looking for the smooth piece, and I just cut it out of there. You know, this is when you bring leftovers home from the restaurant. They will give you a styrofoam, at least in the United States. I hear that styrofoam plate's not as common in other countries, probably because it's not good for the environment. But I'm reusing it. So I've got my hot knife, which is for wood burning, and I'm creating uh, a design. And I wanted to show you guys that if you would like to have text in a gel print, you'll realize that when you use stamps and things on the plate, everything is reversed. But if you want a name or something, you can write it with a ball tool, a ball stylus, or in this case, a hot knife onto styrofoam, and then it becomes a texture plate. And you take a straight edge, a card or a paint shaper or something, and you scrape the paint down into those grooves that you've created, and then they will make an impression on the plate. When you press it down, the paint's down in the grooves and it gets on the plate. And then when we pull it off, it is the right direction. So one thing that I have a hard time doing is waiting for it to dry. It looks better if you wait for the paint to dry on the plate. And I'm so used to having a quick drying time because I live in Arizona that when I have that cloppy paint on there, it doesn't dry as fast. It makes me annoyed, and I don't wait. So for this second round, I put purple paint down in there. I went and washed it. You can wash it off in the sink and get the excess out of the grooves, and then you can use it multiple times. This is what I'm showing you on the big plate, the 12 by 12. You can just keep printing it, and that paint's down in there. So when you press the styrofoam into the plate firmly, you're still getting paint transfer. So I have some more pieces here, and of course that's my name and my studio name, but you could write anything on there. You could write, positive words. You could write someone else's name if you're making them a special gift. You can use this technique if you want right way writing. And you can also just use the technique making shapes and doodles and things, and it'll make a really interesting texture plate. So it's a fun thing to do. If you have excess paper from your takeout containers, I mean styrofoam from your takeout containers. So I made this whole big piece. I'll probably cut it up, I guess. I'm not real sure I'm going to use it for. Figure it out later. Just wanted to show you that you could do it multiple times. You just keep doing it until the paint is out of the grooves. And if you want to reuse it, you probably should wash it because the paint will dry in the grooves and eventually they'll fill up. But this one turned out the best because the paint was dry on the plate. So you can really read that one the best. The next prompt was yarn. And yarn is fun. It makes interesting random patterns on your plate. I have a couple different types here and that I'm going to use, and I'm still using that Arteza. That's leftover string and thread from sewing and from those are the strings that I pulled out of the edges of pieces of torn up fabric. I have some 6x6 squares of fabric that I plan on printing on and sewing them into something. I just haven't done it yet, but they always have edges, so when I pull the edges, I just have that little ball of threads. Makes things interesting texture. That one is string, like string, like you get in a big roll, cotton string. It makes an interesting texture. Sometimes you can do a darker color, put your string on, clean off the excess, and then go over it again with a lighter color and then print on top of it, and you'll get an interesting two-tone print. That's probably the best way to do this yarn technique is to print one on top of the other, starting darker and going lighter. But you can also just pull it as a separate print. You don't have to necessarily print them on top of each other. So this is eyelash yarn. Every time I say that, I get grossed out. It's like, what? They harvested eyelashes and they sewed it into yarn? That's so disgusting. But no, it's just called that because it has a lot of excess floppy bits on there. That one's still with the string, and then those are all string. The eyelash yarn makes interesting. It's very interesting on here. And actually, when you get some of the kits from Jelly Arts, they come with eyelash yarn in them included. I guess so that you don't have to go and buy a whole spool of it. But any type of textured yarn is interesting on the plate. I also noticed that my friend Peg put out a picture, and I think she just took a whole rolled up ball of yarn and made impressions on her plate, which I think is smart. The only thing is your ball of yarn would be ruined because now you've got acrylic paint on it. So I don't know. I didn't want to do that because, I might want to use that yarn again. But it made very interesting textures. It was cool. So that one's one on top of the other. That one's not. I'm making another impression on this one. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, please remember to give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment or question below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share if you want to. Pin this on Pinterest on your gel printing board so other people can find it and other people can find my channel. That's always helpful. This one is just regular thread again. It's like just a little wad of thread that, when you're sewing, you always have excess thread that you're cutting off. Makes interesting texture on your plate. You guys should try it. That one had way too much paint to lift up. So the second one lifted up. The first one just was like white. It was yucky. Yucky. And then I thought I would make some black ones to see how those would come out. And I'm clearing off all the black onto just like a piece of scrap paper that's laying around on the bigger one. And then the smaller one, I'm making a print. Very dramatic, black and white. So then for the smaller plate, I used copper and picked up onto black. And you can really see the impression of the yarn on it. It's really cool looking. I think that's actually string. And then on the other one, I wanted to make bright colors. So I put a bunch of bright paint on there, and then I was impatient, so I pulled some of the paint off because I didn't want to wait for it to dry, and then picked it up with white, and I got a lot of texture because I had pulled the paint off. So anyway, that's it for me for these three. Thanks. Bye-bye.